But it does not seem that I can trust anyone, said Frodo. Sam looked at him unhappily. It all depends on what you want, put in Merry. You can trust us to stick to you through thick and thin, to the bitter end. And you can trust us to keep any secret of yours, closer than you keep it yourself. But you cannot trust us to let you face trouble alone and go off without a word. We are your friends, Frodo. Anyway, there it is. We know most of what Gandalf has told you. We know a good deal about the ring. We are horribly afraid, but we are coming with you, or following you like hounds.
Welcome to the Wayward Wizards podcast. Today we are reading Book 1, Chapter 5, A Conspiracy Unmasked. I'm Zach, and I'm here with Fatty Bulger himself, Logan.
That's me.
Fatty Bulger, top name in Lord of the Rings.
We go from one of the worst names, Farmer Maggot,
Farmer Maggot,
to one of the very best names and a real mensch. A real mensch, Fatty Bulger.
Fatty Bulger. I mean, he's great. He's as brave as either of us would be if we were in this story.
Exactly. That's why I love him.
He's just like, yeah, you guys are gonna go off and do that thing. I hope you don't need any rescuing by the end of the day. But Fatty is great. Also, I mean, we'll just add that to the list of things that Tolkien would get canceled for if he were alive today.
Yeah,
just blatant fat phobia,
fat shaming.
This guy's name is essentially like fat ass, it's just like fat ass Bulger.
Drogo and his vittles, and then Fatty Bulger. It's hilarious.
Yeah, like Tolkien loved a good fat joke. And I think we forget like how much of like Hobbit culture is just that they're like little rotund, little
just eating and drinking.
Just soft around the belly.
Yeah, it's great.
Fatty Bulger. What's Fatty's real name?
Fredegar.
Fredegar Bulger.
It's quite the name. He needs a nickname. You know what I mean? Like a lot of these guys have names that just demand a nickname because you can't go around just being Fredegar.
Yeah, you're not going to go around calling your friend Fredegar. That's Fatty if I ever heard one. But yeah, so I mean, what happens in this chapter this week? They narrowly avoid disaster.
Yeah, they narrowly avoid the Black Rider at the river. And it's funny, like instead of just having rising action, Tolkien is like, he like ramps it up and then ramps it down and then ramps it up and then ramps it down. It's like this real roller coaster at the beginning. It's not just rising action until, we really start. It's this whole process of kind of getting going. It's like
you're so right.
Steam locomotive, like getting rolling or something like that.
Yeah, I think like, and that's such a like stumbling block for people who are reading,
which is understandable
for the first time.
Yeah,
I mean, you have to almost like tell people like, all right, get through the Council of Elrond. All right, you get through the Council of Elrond, the story just like picks up pace, but right up until the Council of Elrond, it's like, oh right, like when is this thing really going to start? But yeah, it's interesting because like you get the kind of the cliffhanger of last chapter.
Right.
Of them thinking that Merry is a Black Rider.
Yeah.
And then they get on their like ferry.
Right.
And they start crossing the river. And then immediately they see a Black Rider.
Yeah. Like right on the, I think it's right on the pier or something like that. It's kind of like where they just took off from, I believe.
It says on the far stage under the distant lamps, they could just make out a figure. It looked like a dark black bundle left behind. But as they looked, it seemed to move and sway this way and that, as if searching the ground. It then crawled or went crouching back into the gloom beyond the lamps.
It's very creepy. They don't just walk, the Black Riders don't just walk around like normal people, they're
like crawling on the ground.
Yeah, they're more like a pile of rags or something like that than they are like people almost.
It's chilling. And it's almost like scarier than kind of the picture of Black Riders that we have in our heads, which are so informed by the Peter Jackson films.
Yeah.
Where they're so much more physically intimidating. You know, they're almost like sweeping like a mist on the ground. They're sweeping back and forth.
Yeah. Crawling and sniffing and just being weird.
And Mary says, "What in the Shire is that?" Which is such a great
I know,
exclamation.
It's so good.
What in the Shire?
What in the Shire is that?
Yeah, because the Shire is their whole world, I guess. Same as saying like what the world.
Yeah. We get some Hobbit history, which I think is interesting.
Yeah. I'd completely forgotten about all this.
Yeah, this stuff about Gorhendad.
Yeah. Sure.
Old Buck crosses the river, changes his name, sort of sets up a colony. It's like,
yeah, it says a Shire colony, as it were.
Hobbit manifest destiny or something.
Yeah,
to cross the river, and then he's got this house that has like 100 windows, which is kind of funny. With this huge.
The Brandybucks and their numerous dependents then began to burrow and later to build all around about. That was the origin of Buckland, a thickly inhabited strip between the river and the Old Forest, a sort of colony from the Shire.
And I love that we've talked a lot about this, but I love that, most of the folk in the Old Shire regarded the Bucklanders as peculiar half foreigners, as it were. Though, as a matter of fact, they were not very different from other hobbits of the Four Farthings, except, of course, that they liked boats and some of them could swim.
Once again, those untrustworthy boat riders.
Messing with boats.
In this, I don't think that we mentioned this later, or mentioned this earlier, rather. There's a really funny bit after Galadriel gives them boats in Lothlorien, and it talks about how much Sam hated being in the boats.
He's not into it.
He's just not into. And we'll have to mark it like when we get to this later, but we just have to remember like how primed we are to think it's really funny that Sam doesn't like boats.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean I think that's like, we talked about how slow it takes for this to kind of take off, but I think he's, it adds to the richness of the story eventually, where he spent some time putting this stuff down around about Hobbit culture and about, like just this small detail about most hobbits, really disliking boats. And then when Sam is so upset about it, then it kind of hits home in a way that it wouldn't otherwise. And so it's it's a slow burn, but it's I think it pays off.
There's a few like Hobbit history, Hobbit nature things that come up in here, like the kind of the origin of the foundations of Buckland is really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Completely unnecessary. Like,
no,
do we really need this aside? Not at all.
Background, yeah.
We get hammered home again that hobbits don't like boats. Like,
right.
All right, Professor Tolkien, we get it. They don't like boats.
Exactly.
Frodo's parents died this way. Like, we're on it. We know. We also get the fact that they're like really unnaturally fond of mushrooms.
Yeah, they're like, can't get enough mushrooms.
So they're just like super into mushrooms.
They're like jealous of
even
them,
more. Yeah. Even to the point where Fatty, once again, I guess we know why he's called Fatty, but he's just like, oh, you guys won't be wanting any more mushrooms, will you? And they're like, keep your greedy, slimy, disgusting hands off of it, Frediger.
Mrs. What's her name?
Maggot? Mrs. Maggot?
Mrs. Maggot gave them to me, and I'll be serving them.
That's right.
It's so good.
Also, just the fact that Mary's like, oh, well, I see that you guys have already eaten dinner. And they're like, oh, we could really use another.
We could use another dinner. Fourth meal.
They just ate 5 miles ago.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And now they're going to sit down and eat more after a bath.
So funny. Before we get to their reunion, though, there was a line in here that I really never noticed until this reading. But there's a really effective, like affecting scene in the Fellowship of the Ring movie where Sam and Frodo are walking when it's still just Sam and Frodo, and Sam stops and has this like great line, which is not in the books, where he's like essentially like, one step more and I'll be further away from home than I've ever been.
Right.
And, it's one of the highlights of the movie. I think it's just like really just hits the imagery on the head of like,
Totally.
They're on a journey and they're walking towards their destiny. But I never realized that there's kind of like an equivalent scene on the ferry here. I was just going to read this. The ferry boat moved slowly across the water. The Buckland shore drew nearer. Sam was the only member of the party who had not been over the river before. He had a strange feeling as the slow, gurgling stream slipped by. His old life lay behind in the mist. Dark adventure lay in front. He scratched his head and for a moment had a passing wish that Mr. Frodo could have gone on living quietly at Bag End. But I mean, that's like a threshold moment for Sam.
Yeah.
Like he's literally crossing a physical boundary that is the furthest away from home that he's ever been.
Yeah.
And he's making a conscious choice to continue on, but also subtly regretting, silently yearning for Frodo just to be able to continue living the way that they had in the simple way before their adventure kicked off.
Yeah, it says a lot about his loyalty to Frodo, I think, as well as his love of the Shire, and that comes through again and again, like how much the Shire is sort of like a touch point for them, for their, like they have some hope or something like that in having a homeland, or a place that they know, and I do think that translates really nicely into the movie. The way that they do that in the film is really beautiful, and probably more affecting than this.
Yeah.
But I do think that, it's really nice when we get a glance into the thoughts of characters like Sam,
right,
and that kind of internal monologue that he has. So,
right.
Yeah. So where are we here? We cross the.
They cross the river.
The river.
While they're halfway across, they see the the Black Rider. Mary is uninformed.
Yeah,
he's like,
that's right.
What in the world?
What in the Shire is that?
What in the Shire? And Frodo's essentially like, hey, yeah, we don't have time to explain that, but we're being followed.
Right.
Mary's probably like, what? Yeah, and he's like, can horses cross the river? And Mary's like, I don't think so. I think they're gonna have to go up, to the Brandywine Bridge, like 10 miles north of here. And he's like, what do horses have to do with it? And he's like, yada yada yada. We don't have time to explain.
Yeah, right.
So there's this building tension there too. You're right. And then they're like, all right, let's go have dinner.
Yeah, we could do with another. You shall have it. Give me that basket.
We're being pursued by a person on horseback.
Yeah.
Who's going to have to go 10 miles up and 10 miles back.
Right.
Which, we talked about how long it would take to walk 20 miles. It's like a day's journey to walk, but how long is that on a horse?
Especially like a demon horse, like.
Yeah, horse demon.
It's some kind
I guess they don't know that about them yet.
But it's some kind of horse that, like, they don't, I don't think that in Mordor they really worry about taking real good care of their horses. Like, if the horse dies, it dies, right? Like,
yeah, they're not precious about their horses. They're only precious right. about the ring. Well, yeah, it's interesting. I know that was a terrible pun.
Horrible.
Cut that out. We might have to cut that out. But it's interesting. Like, Tolkien took a lot of care when you go back and look at his notes and his drafts. He took a lot of care to show that the Nazgul don't cross rivers. They don't cross bodies of water.
Oh yeah, interesting.
They always go around bodies of water. Like, they might go across like shallow bits of water, but they don't ford rivers ever.
That's interesting.
That's just like an interesting character trait of the Nazgul, is that they always go around rivers.
So they'll take a bridge.
Yep.
But they won't. Yeah, they're not going to swim a horse across. And the Brandywine must be. I think we think of. I don't know. I think of the Shire as like this place that doesn't have any like major geography or something like that. But like,
yeah,
the Brandywine's a pretty major river. I mean, it has to be a pretty deep and swift moving river for a horse not to swim.
Especially for a hobbit, it would be. Well, yeah, because they don't swim. Hobbits don't swim. In fact, like Tolkien kind of makes a big point of the Bucklanders being weird because he says some of them could swim.
Yeah,
but
right.
I think it's just kind of assumed that hobbits can't swim. I'm not sure exactly why it is that the Nazgul don't cross water, apart from the fact that, like, in Tolkien, water is like this kind of sacred,
rivers
spiritual,
have a sacred thing in the ocean. Too.
Oh yeah, which we'll get at the very end of this chapter. Another vision of the sea.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're kind of a place where spirits and the powers have like more magic. Like they inhabit rivers, they inhabit the sea, and yeah, I mean that will come up a little bit later when we talk about Tom Bombadil. We might have to do 2 chapters on Tom Bombadil too. Actually, I know we're going to have to do 2 chapters on the Council of Elrond.
I know.
Bombadil,
we'll see.
Bombadil's weird.
There's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot going on there for sure.
So we cross the river and we get to Frodo's new house that he's bought, which, is like kind of like they say it was like an extension of the Brandybuck Hall.
Right.
And the Brandybucks had built it for like use for visitors and things like that.
Yeah. Sort of a guest house. I love the detail that it says that it was an old-fashioned countrified house, as much like a hobbit hole as possible. Long and low with no upper story, had a roof of turf, round windows, and a large round door. I just think that's so sweet.
Yeah, it's like a hobbit hole-ish house.
Yeah.
It's not a hobbit hole, but it's still it's still got those like kind of trappings of the traditional hobbit hole that we picture in our heads. Yeah, it's like kind of, it's an out of the way place. It's not going to be noticed by a lot of people. That's why they chose it.
Yeah.
It says you can get in and out without being noticed.
I like that we get this detail that it was a pleasant, comfortable, welcoming place. And it says that Frodo found himself wishing that he was really coming here to settle down in quiet retirement. Retirement from what? Being like a rich person?
Retirement from being retired. Yeah, exactly.
Retirement from a Hobbiton, I guess. Retirement from having to deal with the SBs.
Yeah, I guess it's, I mean, it's, that's, I don't, we'll have to like look it up. Like if retirement meant something different to
I think that
gentry.
I think that is what it is. Like you retire from like public life or something like that.
Because he had like all these hobbits that were dependent on his estate.
Right. Exactly. That's the
retirement. So it's kind of like, the people who were at Downton Abbey, they didn't work a day in their lives, but they also had a bunch of people that worked for them and were dependent on them. And so you can imagine them retiring to a country life, and no longer being responsible.
Yeah, your job is to throw parties and maintain your wealth and be sort of a socialite or something like that. And so
make sure the gaffer has this creaky joint ointment.
Right. And and instead of like throwing birthday parties for the whole community, you just throw birthday parties for your like relatives or something like that,
Yeah.
But yeah, I underlined that. I was like, yeah, retirement, like it must be nice.
Oh, yeah, your life is so hard. Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Yes, and this is when we're introduced to old Fatty.
Yeah,
old Frediger.
Exactly.
Had Fatty been introduced before this moment in the story? Like had he? So we had Falco.
So. I don't believe so.
Yeah, I think we had Fatty and Falco.
Oh before. Yeah, that's right. Maybe there's a mention of them, or they help. Maybe they help move stuff from Bag End to Crick Hollow.
Yeah, they're mentioned as like his close friends. Yeah, so we were introduced to Fatty really briefly in the Three's Company chapter. Here's the line. It says, "Some of Frodo's friends came to stay and help him with the packing. These were Frediger Bolger and Falco Boffin, and of course his special friends Pippin Took and Mary Brandybuck. Between them, they turned the whole place upside down." So Fatty's kind of been there from the beginning. He at least gets some lines. He's one of the boys.
Yeah.
He's one of the lads.
Yeah.
One of the lads. But yeah, he unlike Falco actually gets some lines of dialogue.
Right.
Dare we say his character's a little fleshed out. But yeah, Falco gets nothing. But yeah, Fatty, he has the place all ready to go. He's clearly like giving them some baths are drawn.
3 baths.
3 baths. I think it's hilarious that when they're like, we have a bath, and Frodo's like, all right, who's going to go first, the oldest or the fastest? Either way, Pippin's going last.
It's so good.
I mean, like, I like you, but I don't think I would be sharing a bath, like your same bath water.
No.
That's
sorry. No.
Thank God for modern amenities.
Thank God for indoor plumbing.
But they lay out 3 separate baths. What luxury.
And then they yuck it up in there. I mean, it's like, it's kind of sexy. It's like soap suds and, I imagine like just like a steamed over lens, and they're in there, getting clean and singing songs and playing with the bathwater.
Yeah, Pippin's making a mess.
Yeah, Mary says you got to mop that up before you come to dinner. You better hurry up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you and I both have kids, and so we both know the like special frustration of walking into a kid like having just destroyed the bathroom.
Yes, exactly.
With soapy water, where it's just like, all right, somebody has to clean this up, Pippin. Like,
exactly.
What are you thinking, man? Like with your singing and your splashing water all over the place.
I love it.
We get a couple really great songs in this chapter.
Indeed.
If I haven't mentioned it in the past, my dad introduced me to Lord of the Rings. When I first started reading it, before the movies came out, I didn't really understand what was going on. And a piece of advice that he gave me in the beginning was just skip the songs. He's like, it's a great book, just skip the songs. And so for years, whenever I'd read the book, I would just like, a song would come up, like the italics would come up, and I'd be like, oh, yeah, moving on to the next part of the story. Not going to bother.
I don't think that's
the songs are great.
I don't think that's bad advice for a kid, though.
No, getting like wrapped up in the poetry, getting lost in the poetry.
Don't get bogged down in the poetry.
But Tolkien was like a really good poet. The songs are great.
I think he was a thoughtful poet. Was he really great? I think he was like technically proficient. You know what I mean?
Whoa. Podcast over.
I don't know if I agree that he was a great poet. I love these songs.
Whoa.
But I'm not sure. I mean, we haven't gotten to Bombadil yet, but like, I don't know.
Tom Bombadillo, you're not a big fan of the Hey Ho Dairy Doll?
Let's just say I know a couple people who speak in rhyme, and it's not that great.
Yeah.
But
I don't know. I think it's great, the idea of like living in a world where people would just burst into song like this.
Yeah,
is pretty great.
I do like that.
Yeah, and we do it too. We sing snatches of songs. We move through the world singing songs.
Like we sing to each other in my house constantly. We're all constantly singing to the dog and about the dog and to each other and about what we're doing. And I mean, it's
songs about the dog. That's pretty great. I mean, so yeah, cut Tolkien some slack. Like he's singing songs about baths.
Yeah, I'm into it. I'm into it.
There was a couple lines from this song that I wanted to ring though. Sweet is the sound of the falling rain and the brook that leaps from hill to plain. But better than rain or rippling streams is hot water that smokes and steams. It's pretty great. Like singing songs about simple pleasures like eating and taking a hot bath after being in the woods for a few days. Pretty great. So yeah, they make a big mess. Mary comes in and Frodo says, "What about supper and beer in the throat?" as he comes out drying his hair, which is such a funny way to put it. So I'm listening to the Andy Serkis audiobook of this.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm kind of switching. Yeah, I mean, if you haven't listened to the audiobooks, the Rob Ingles audiobook is like the classic audiobook, which is the audiobook that I've listened to for years. And the Andy Serkis one has just come out in the last few years, and he's excellent and really great. I think it's such an accomplishment. But I never caught this until I heard him say it. But Mary, when he looks on the floor, the wet floor, he says in the written version, it's spelled Lawks. So I always read that as like locks. I never knew what it meant. I remember having read this like in one of my like rereadings in the last few years and being like, what is that? What does that mean? And then just kind of moving on. Andy Serkis pronounces it as like lords. And I looked it up, and it's an expression that means Lord. So like you say it like, oh Lord.
Oh, lorks.
Like oh lorks. Like it's like an expression that means oh Lord.
Yeah, right.
And that's one thing that I've kind of tracked on this rereading is Sam says Lord a lot. Like he says like oh Lord, or like at one point to Gandalf he says Lord bless you, or Lord bless me, or Lord bless that, Lord bless that. You know, Mary says Lord.
When he grabs him from the window, he says, Lord bless you.
Yeah, Lord bless you, Mr. Gandalf. You know,
Gandalf. Yeah.
I just kind of tracked. I was like, all right, so what does Lord mean in this context? Because if we say, oh Lord, usually we're like kind of like referring to God.
The
like,
Lord of hosts.
The Lord above. Ever heard of him? But yeah, you know, like we'll say like, oh Lord, or oh Lordy. But in Tolkien's world, there's kind of like, this is like not like kind of famously God is absent from the story. Even though God is very much there, the more you look for that in Tolkien's writing. But yeah, like who are they referring to here when they say Lord?
I think this came up at a previous episode. I think it's like leftover from the time when there was a king over this land, right? So like Aragorn's whatever, great whatever. That's my guess, is that it's like the Lord of the land.
So I did a little more digging, and I think that's wrong, which is part of why I brought this up.
Oh, okay.
Because
so you just led me into a trap. Let's see if we can get Logan to say something stupid so that I can correct him. You're so smart, Zach. We get it. So smart.
Here we go. All right. So here's what I think. I think it's less, and it could be that they're like referring to the king or the Lord of the land or something like that. I think it's much more likely that Tolkien treated this like a found text. Okay. And so what he's doing is doing what any translator would do, which is taking an idiom in one language, and rather than translating the idiom word for word, is replacing it with an English idiom with the same meaning.
Yep.
So like in the same way that like if you were to sneeze and I would say bless you, I don't literally mean like, you know, God bless you. It's just something that we say. It's idiomatic.
Right.
I think it's they in whatever Hobbit language they're speaking, Westeron or whatever, which is very different from English. They had some idiomatic saying that was like, oh my gosh, or oh my Lord, or God bless you, whatever. And Tolkien is replacing it with an English idiom of the same meaning. So that
makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's all over biblical translation, and any translator is doing that kind of work constantly, right?
Yeah. If you give a wooden translation word for word, it's not actually going to make any sense. You have
just like Samwise Gamgee is not his name; it's a translation of what his actual name was in Westeron or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes more sense than my stupid take. God.
Oh man, I'm so glad that you said something so stupid so that I could look so smart.
You look so smart right now. So smart.
No, but yeah, Lawks, Lawks. Lorks. It just means like, oh Lord, which we'll see if that comes up again in the entire book. I doubt it.
So you think Andy Serkis, he did that research, or somebody did and said, this is how you're going to say it.
Had to have, unless, you know, if we have any British listeners, again, we keep intoning our British listeners. If anybody who's British is listening, please email us through our website and let us know.
simple, tax dodgers. We're not sure. We don't always know. And so if you can please let us know, that'd be great. But yeah, so they have dinner, and then the sort of story begins to unfold for Mary and Fredegar. Mostly for Mary, I guess.
Yeah, Fredegar doesn't really seem to care as much because he's like, I'm not going anywhere anyway.
Yeah.
All this sounds terrifying. The less I know, the better.
Right.
Though I do think it's interesting that we get the little tidbit that Fredegar has some of Frodo's clothes.
Yeah.
So that he can like dress up like Frodo and people can think that
I'm in danger. He's not like that struck me on this reread and my last reread. I'm like, this guy's brave. You know what I mean? Like, he's not so brave and like
he doesn't want to go on an adventure, but
exactly.
But he's got willing to be a decoy.
Right. He's got like fortitude. You know what I mean? Like, he's willing to sort of like stand in the way of these, whatever this like wraith is, right? Like,
yeah.
I think that means something, like he's one of the lads, but like, he's one of the lads because he's like made of like, similar stuff as the rest of these guys. Like, he kind of like, he's like, I don't know. He's got that same spirit to him.
We get too brief a vision of Fatty. But I also think it's funny they essentially call him Fat Ass, but he's able to wear Frodo's clothes. So what does that say about Frodo?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's funny.
It's like, maybe they should be a little nicer to Fredegar.
Right. Poor guy.
Yeah, this is like before we stopped bullying each other. Before this book was written before bullying was outlawed.
Yeah. Bullying was how you show love to each other in some way. Taking the piss.
Yeah, taking the piss. Exactly. But anyway, yeah, Mary says, now tell me all about it. I guess that you have been having adventures and it's not quite fair without me. I want a full account, and I want to know what was the matter with old Maggot and why he spoke to me like that. He sounded almost as if he was scared, if that's possible.
Yeah, Maggot's like a legend. I love him.
Absolute legend. And it says here, old Maggot is a shrewd fellow. A lot goes on behind his round face that does not come out in his talk. I've heard that he used to go into the old forest at one time and has the reputation of knowing a good many strange things. Yeah. And I think that that's like a little bit of an echo of something that was in the draft history of Lord of the Rings, which is that for a while, Tolkien was toying with the idea of making Maggot like a more significant character. We find out during the Tom Bombadil chapter coming up that Maggot and Tom Bombadil are friends.
Yeah.
And that Bombadil gets news from Maggot. But there was a period of time when Bombadil and Maggot were going to be like of equal stature. They were both going to be like strange spiritual beings.
I see. Interesting.
Of like unspecified levels of power and origin. So this is kind of an echo of that. Like, they're kind of like, oh, like, there's something about Maggot that doesn't quite meet the eye. There's something special about him that we don't quite know. And I think this just kind of like is a little bit of a remnant of that plan that Tolkien had.
Yeah, that's cool. It's interesting. Frodo says, after they fill Mary in about the Black Riders, and Maggot's guess about Bilbo's treasure.
Yeah.
Frodo says, I think it was a good guess as far as it goes. And then he says, I'm not safe here or anywhere else. And so the adventure has started, and there's not really a moment of what you would think of as like true safety.
No. Yeah.
Anymore.
Even though they're yucking it up in their baths, like they still, like Frodo still knows that things are like about to go south. But yeah, I mean, this whole time, like, Frodo has been kind of like holding everything really close to the vest. But we find out now that Merry and Pippin have known all along.
Yeah, I love that. I love these details where Frodo is talking and Pippin turns to Merry and whispers, "It's coming out in a minute."
Yeah.
Merry nods. Frodo doesn't even like notice.
It's like, all right, he's about to tell us finally.
And then Merry says, "I think I could help you by telling you some of it myself." And there's this beautiful sort of way that close friends see us better than we see ourselves. Like we're more transparent to our friends than we are to our, like to our own subjectivity. And he just says, "Just this, my dear old Frodo, you are miserable because you don't know how to say goodbye. You meant to leave the Shire, of course, but danger has come on you sooner than you expected. And now you're making up your mind to go at once. And you don't want to. We are very sorry for you."
Yeah.
We are very sorry for you.
Yeah. Oh, I love that they're like, hey man, you've not given nearly enough like stock to the inquisitiveness of friends.
Exactly.
Like she's like, do you really think you were like pulling this? Like he's like, you were just like walking from place to place, being like, oh, I wonder if this is the last time I'm gonna see that tree. I wonder if this is the last time I'll see this river.
Yeah. You don't think like we pay attention to you? Like we spend all of our time with you. It's like our job to like hang out.
We know you really, really well.
Yeah.
And yeah, and they call themselves conspirators, which is, kind of a tongue in cheek,
sweet
title that they've given themselves, where they're like, all right, we're just going to like let Frodo think that he's keeping this secret, but really, we're kind of gathering information. Right. And, we get all kinds of like cool background stuff where it's like, first of all, Merry knows about the ring.
Yeah. Oh man.
Because Frodo's he was spying on Bilbo. Hell? It's like, you know about the ring? Like what in the world?
Yes.
Because he goes, we know the ring is no laughing matter, but we're going to do our best to help you against the enemy. And Frodo says, the ring? Yes, the ring, says Merry. You do not allow for the inquisitiveness of friends. I have known about the existence of the ring for years, before Bilbo went away, in fact. But since he obviously regarded it as a secret, I kept the knowledge in my head until we formed our conspiracy. He saw Bilbo put on the ring to get away from the Sackville Bagginses, which is just a hilarious little aside.
The Sackville Bagginses were his downfall, as you might expect.
SBs, once again, the Sackville Baggins slur is brought
SBs.
up. Speaking of, this is kind of a strange thing. A little bit of Italian makes its way into the text here, which I never realized until I was looking it over this morning. It says Bilbo slowed down, and then hey presto, he vanished.
Oh, interesting.
And I did a little bit of reading on this. That hey presto kind of comes from magicians saying presto changeo.
Yeah.
Which is like a British trope. When you have magic shows, magicians will, wave their magic wands and say presto changeo. And then that turned into hey presto, which just means like, instantly, because presto means quickly in Italian. But I just think it's interesting that that's another idiom that kind of made its way into the text. It doesn't quite fit in Middle Earth to have like an Italian idiom.
Yeah, no one ever says hocus pocus, right? Like
not in
but it's
not in this book.
It's similar. I mean, it's in the same vein.
Hey presto. Yeah.
Hey presto. That's cool. He vanished. And it was really magical. Like this is a magic moment that's not just like connected to some kind of like natural thing or
presto changeo.
Yeah. It's like
here it is.
Really vanished. And then reappears just like that also.
Just like that. Yeah, that's exactly what that means. Hey presto, just like that.
Right.
In the blink of an eye. But yeah, Merry's been spying on Bilbo for years after that moment. He, saw the glint of gold.
I think that was a year before the party. It's one day, a year before the party. I happened.
This is when Merry would have been a teenager still.
Yeah, right.
Because Merry's like in his 30s here. Party was like about 17 years ago. So 1 year before that. So it's like Merry's a young hobbit.
But 13. He starts paying. I think he starts paying attention. Like something is like not just a little different about Bilbo and Frodo. Something is like really different about him.
Right.
And
so much so that he reads the transcript of Bilbo's book.
Yeah, somehow like rifles through it and reads.
This naughty little hobbit, is interesting. Like we talked about how like hobbits are not perfect. They're not little angels.
They're kind of naughty.
There's a naughtiness to them.
Yeah.
And this has kind of echoes of Pippin stealing the Palantir coming up in a few books.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Where it's like he knows that he shouldn't, but he just kind of can't help himself, and he's got itchy palms. And so Merry kind of spying on Bilbo and like going and reading the book, even though he knows that he shouldn't. There's a naughtiness to it that I think is really interesting.
They kind of can't help themselves,
Yeah, it'd be too cool a chance to pass up. And
right.
we've all had that experience, especially when we were younger, where we're just like, oh, I need to go. Like, Mom told me not to like get a scoopful of the brownie batter, but I can't help myself. I gotta go do it while Mom's not looking. Or we all have that tendency in us, that kind of naughtiness in us, but it's interesting to see it reflected in the hobbits.
Mm-hmm. So Merry kept the knowledge to himself until this spring when things got serious. Then we formed our conspiracy. And as we were serious too and meant business, we have not been too scrupulous. You are not a very easy nut to crack, and Gandalf is worse. So funny. But if you want to be introduced to our chief investigator, I can produce him.
Where is he? Said Frodo, looking like around as if
looks for a mask,
expecting a masked and sinister figure to come out of the cupboard.
Step forward, Sam. And Sam comes up with his face scarlet to his ears. So good.
Here's our collector of information. And he collected a lot, I can tell you, before he was finally caught. After which I may say he seemed to regard himself as on parole and dried up.
Yeah. So when did Sam start collecting information? Do we know?
We were talking about this like right before we started recording, because this is a question in my mind. So let me just kind of lay out the conspiracy as it's presented, and then we can try to decide. So it seems like Gandalf comes to Frodo and says, hey, by the way, this ring that you have was essentially crafted by a demon of Satan, and is your job, divinely ordained by God, to throw it into a lava pit called the Cracks of Doom in the dark land of Mordor. And Frodo's like, say what? He, decides he has to leave, but then they take several months to get moving until after Frodo's birthday, when they finally leave the Shire. Frodo is ostensibly just told Sam about this information. And Merry and Pippin, Fatty and Falco, the lads, as far as they know, Frodo's just moving to Buckland.
Right.
And they're helping him move house, but they're also helping him buy his new house. They're helping with all the logistics of getting that move to happen. But only Frodo and Sam really know what's up.
Right.
What Merry is telling us here is that they've all known all along, and that Sam has been helping them get information this whole time. That Sam has kind of filled them in about basically everything. And so the line that kind of tripped me up this time says, here's our collector of information. He collected a lot, I can tell you, before he was finally caught, after which he seemed to regard himself as on parole and dried up.
Right. So when was he caught?
Are they talking about when Gandalf caught Sam eavesdropping?
And that's what I think of right away, is Sam eavesdropping.
But that's at the very beginning. That's when all the information is the very first presentation of information about the ring. So is the implication here that they've been spying on Frodo since before Gandalf came to tell him what the ring is? Which that doesn't make any sense to me.
It doesn't make sense for the conversation they're having right now, where they're laying out everything that happened, right? And
because everything they learned from what Gandalf told Frodo. It's
confusing. It's basically the question is did you catch Tolkien in a mistake?
I don't think so. I guess the question in my mind is is the idea that Sam has been spying on Frodo for years for Merry and Pippin? In which case, this seems a lot less cute
Yeah, it's a little weird. I mean, Mary just admitted that he's been keeping an eye on Frodo since before Bilbo's party.
Yeah, for like almost 20 years.
Yeah. So, um, so there's something happening there, but I still don't understand when Sam was caught. Like, if Sam, because Sam was caught the same day that Gandalf told Frodo about the ring.
Yeah. So I don't know if it's a mistake or if it's just that it's not very clearly, because he wasn't caught again.
No. I want to chalk it up to like an editing issue, right? Like the book has 3 editors: Frodo, Bilbo, and Sam.
And then Tolkien himself.
And then Tolkien himself, who's relating it, who was, like an elf related it to him or whatever.
Yes.
And so, I think
this is a translation error.
Yeah, I think it's like a textual provenance problem. That the timeline got a little snagged, and this is what we're left with.
If you're happy with that explanation, I am. But yeah, only this time was I like, wait, when Sam got caught at the beginning of the conspiracy. So how was he giving them more information before he got caught when there was no information to give?
If anybody has any follow up, and any FUs, and they want to let us know.
Yeah, Professor Corey Olson, if you are listening to this podcast,
please email. Come on the show, actually, and explain it to us.
Corey, come on the show,
buddy.
Yeah, moving on from that question of like, when did Sam know what when? It is like, it's a little confusing, and this is another thing where it's kind of like, all right, if I was Tolkien's editor, I might say like, hey, like, get to it, man. Like, we don't need this conspiracy unmasked chapter really at all.
Back and forth. But what we do need is we need these guys to say like, we're your friends and we're sticking with you.
Yeah, like don't try and like tell us that we're not. That in my mind, this is one of the most moving pieces of the book. In fact, like when you and I first started reading Lord of the Rings together, I think I mentioned this as like one of the most moving pieces of the story in general.
Yeah.
Which is this line where Mary says, "You can trust us to stick to you through thick and thin to the bitter end. And you can trust us to keep any secret of yours closer than you can keep it yourself. But you cannot trust us to let you face trouble alone and go off without a word. You're our friends, Frodo." It's like he's saying, like, Frodo's like, "Oh, how could I trust you guys ever again? You've been lying to me." And he's like, "No, okay, here's what you can trust us to do. And that's not to let you go off to your death without us sticking with you. Like, we're your friends, and we're not going to let you go off on your own. That's what you can trust, is that we're not going to let you go off on your own." And that's just so moving.
We've been lying to you out of our love for you, because we know you better than you know yourself. We like see what you're doing, and you are not leaving on this adventure without us. Not because we're so addicted to adventure, although, being where they're from in the Shire and who their lineage is, like, I think they're more
they're naive about what's coming, for sure.
They're naive, but they're also more we're kind of told that certain hobbits are more prone, because they're tooks or whatever, to these kind of adventures. But
that's right.
But the main thing is that, like, we're coming with you because we're your friends. Sam's coming with you because he's like loyal like a dog. And but we have agency and we're coming. And so just deal with it. We love you too much to let you go into this danger by yourself.
It's such a theme in Lord of the Rings, the idea of fellowship. I mean, this book is literally called The Fellowship of the Ring, right?
Yeah, right.
But I think there's something so beautiful about saying that the thing that's going to make this quest successful in the face of certain death and evil beyond reckoning is simple friendship.
Yeah.
And a refusal to give up on your friends.
Absolutely.
When we get to the Council of Elrond coming up, they're trying to decide who's going to come with Frodo on his quest. And there's a few that are kind of just like givens, like, okay, yeah, Gandalf's going to come.
Right.
Like there's no version of the story where Gandalf doesn't go with Frodo for the company, they call it. But there's 9 slots, and they choose 9 slots because they want to combat the 9 Nazgul. And there's a representative from every race. So you have Gandalf, who's like, the wizard. You have Boromir and Aragorn, who are the men. Legolas, who is a representative of the elves. Gimli, who's a dwarf. But then there's a couple slots left. 2 slots left. And there's some conversation. They're like, all right, are we like, which of these like powerful immortal beings are we going to take with us on the rest of the quest? And Gandalf is like, you should take Merry and Pippin.
Yeah.
And Elrond is like, what?
These 2 little dudes.
Like these helpless, childlike, 3 foot tall, shoeless, like they don't fight. They don't have magic.
Right.
And Gandalf essentially says like, like their love of Frodo is going to be more powerful than any weapon that we could provide them with. Like Gandalf's wisdom is that he recognizes that friendship is a powerful thing. And like how do you fight evil? You fight it with friendship and with loyalty and fidelity.
Yeah.
That's a really beautiful thing. I think it's interesting that Gandalf's first advice to Frodo is to take someone you can entrust with you. And then that's how we get Sam. And then Gildor like kind of extends it out a little bit more and says like, take with you anyone that you can trust.
Right.
Like any friend that will go with you. That's Gildor's advice.
Yep.
And that's what we get here. This beautiful commitment from his friends to not let him go alone.
I also think Gandalf, we'll probably repeat this, but Gandalf knows these guys aren't going to be sent back to the Shire.
No.
Like, it's just not going to happen, So lean into it, And it immediately gives hope to Frodo. He says, "You are deceitful. You are a set of deceitful scoundrels. But bless you." And he laughs. He gets up and waves his arms. "I give in. I will take Gildor's advice. If the danger were not so dark, I should dance for joy. Even so, I can't help feeling happy, happier than I felt for a long time. And I had dreaded this evening," because he was dreading saying, I'm going by myself. I'm leaving all 3 of you behind.
And I've been lying to you.
Yeah, I've been lying. And they're like, we know the story and we're coming. And he's like, relieved,
Yeah.
Good, that's settled. 3 cheers for Captain Frodo and company.
3 cheers for Captain Frodo and company.
They danced around him. They're such little kids, still.
They're such little kids. And then they sing another little song.
Yeah, the dwarf song.
Based off the dwarf song. With foes ahead, behind us dread, beneath the sky shall be our bed. Until at last our toil be past, our journey's done, our errand sped. We must away, we ride before the break of day.
Very good, said Frodo. But in this case, there are a lot of things to do before we go to bed. Under a roof for tonight, at any rate.
Oh, that was poetry, said Pippin. Do you really mean to start before the break of day? Oh, I love that.
So these guys had prepared the song, it says. Merry and Pippin began a song which they apparently had got ready for the occasion.
Oh, what lads.
That's funny.
They're great. They're great. Yeah, they not only did they prepare dinner and baths, but they also had time to like write a little song to get the journey started.
Yeah. Did they? But I don't understand. How do they know this song? It's the dwarf song that they sing at Bag End, isn't it?
Mary just said that he read the transcript of The Hobbit.
Oh, that's true. Maybe it was in there. I guess it is in there. Yeah.
But also knowing what we know is like the very first pages of The Hobbit. So I guess that's how far Mary got. But knowing what we know about Bilbo, like, do you really think that Bilbo didn't tell all of the little?
Yeah, he told everyone all of it. Yeah, that makes
including
sense.
the songs.
And
like they probably grew up hearing it on Bilbo's knee. But I love how efficient Merry is. I think like in the movies, Merry and Pippin are just like borderline like imbeciles.
Yeah, they're like jesters or something. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they're always there for comedic effect.
Right.
But they're really not like shown as like very capable people. Merry is like a master of logistics. He plans uh all the packing. He says, I prepared practically everything. There are 5 ponies in the stable across the fields. Stores and tackle are all packed except for a few extra clothes and the perishable food. And yeah, I mean, he has a list and he's checking it twice. He's making sure that everything's going according to plan. And they decide to leave like right in the morning.
Yeah.
And their plan is to go through the old forest, which Frediger does not like the sound of.
He's like, that is a mistake.
You can't think of me doing that. It's quite as dangerous as Black Riders. Well, you do what you think best, said Frediger. I'm more afraid of the old forest than of anything I know about. The stories about it are a nightmare. But my vote hardly counts, as I'm not going to go on the journey. Still, I am very glad someone is stopping behind who can tell Gandalf what you have done when he turns up, as I'm sure he will before long. Good old Frediger.
Merry's a little bit cavalier about the old forest. Brandy Bucks go in. We have our own private entrance. Frodo went in once. And of course we hear that, maybe Farmer Maggot had spent time in there.
Which we get confirmation of in a couple chapters.
Yeah. And but that's their plan, is to stay off the road. It sort of served them well already. So I guess it makes sense to continue that way.
That's right.
Fredigar is going to stay behind and keep up a pretense that Baggins was still at Frodo is still at Crick Hollow.
He's the decoy.
He'll wear those clothes we were talking about earlier. And then it says they didn't even really think about how dangerous that might be for him.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a little on the nose narration there, huh?
Yeah.
They little thought how dangerous that part might prove.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I love that Frodo kind of throws shade on the Black Riders a little bit. He says, we could not have left any messages behind for Gandalf otherwise. I don't know whether these riders can read or not. Of course, I should not have dared to risk a written message in case they got in and searched the house. But if Fatty is willing to hold the fort, I can be sure of Gandalf knowing the way that we have gone. I just love. He's like, I don't know if they can read. Like, you think these guys can read?
What are they even? I mean, yeah, their capacities are they're pretty mysterious. They're way more mysterious here than they are in any kind of visual translation of the novel.
Absolutely. So they decide to go to bed, and then they're going to wake up before the break of day, before daylight.
And Tolkien drops a dream on us.
Let's read a little bit of it.
Yeah.
Eventually he fell into a vague dream in which he seemed to be looking out of a high window over a dark sea of tangled trees. Down below among the roots there was the sound of creatures crawling and snuffling. He felt sure that they would smell him out sooner or later. Then he heard a noise in the distance. At first he thought it was a great wind coming over the leaves of the forest. Then he knew that it was not leaves, but the sound of the sea far off, a sound he had never heard in waking life, though it had often troubled his dreams. Suddenly he found he was out in the open. There were no trees after all. He was on a dark heath, and there was a strange salt smell in the air. Looking up, he saw before him a tall white tower standing alone on a high ridge. A great desire came over him to climb the tower and see the sea. He started to struggle up the ridge toward the tower, but suddenly a light came in the sky, and there was a noise of thunder.
His fear in the first part of his dream, he's in a tower. There's creatures crawling and snuffling. Maybe that's a little allusion to the sniffing of the of the Black Riders, is answered by this like hope or something. It's like another one of those
absolutely
those encouragements that are sent by the Valar.
Well, so if you lay out the timeline of where they are now and where Gandalf is,
mm-hmm.
Gandalf is imprisoned at the pinnacle of Isengard right now. So I think what's probably happening here is that he's being given a vision of like what Gandalf sees looking
from
out
Gandalf.
over
from Gandalf.
I think so. Like we get the sense that Gandalf is able to project out of his own mind into the minds of those that he knows and loves.
Yeah.
And so I think that this is probably like, it starts with like him receiving this like vision from Gandalf, either directly from Gandalf or mediated by the Valar to him in his dream. But then he's given a vision of the White Tower in the sea, which is, where eventually he's going to cross the sea.
Right. There's another tower. Right.
Another tower. Yeah. So you have like the Dark Tower in the Sea of Trees, and then you have the White Tower. So it's where he's going eventually. Like he's being given a vision of like the end of the story here.
Yeah. I really love a detail here that I really love is that it works like dreams actually work.
Yeah.
He's at the top of a tower. Then suddenly he's on the ground looking up at a tower.
Yeah.
That's how dreams work. You don't like walk from one place. It's not like you had to climb down the tower to like get to the ground,
No.
It's like, it just like jumps around, and it sort of is not like a linear experience exactly.
Right.
He's on a dark heath. There's a strange salt smell in the air. He's looking up. Then he's kind of trying to get toward it. He feels this desire to be there, up the ridge. And then we get the light and the noise of thunder, which, we find out is a transition into the next chapter. The way that the world, waking world kind of can invade our sleeping life as well. So
the first line of the next chapter is Frodo woke suddenly, and Merry was standing there with a candle in one hand and banging on the door with the other. So you get the idea that like the candle is the light and the banging on the door is the sound of thunder. But obviously, these have like deeper, like visual, metaphorical meanings. The light and the sound of thunder. It's impossible to say like what those necessarily represent, but they're so evocative. They're so
well. We don't get a pale horse, but if he hadn't woken up, maybe he would have seen. It's sort of apocalyptic. Yeah. I think it's supposed to.
There's these apocalyptic like visions that he's being given. And the towers, the sea, which represents death, and the fating of the elves who cross the sea into Valinor. Deeply affecting stuff. I mean, it's what a weird little chapter. Only 10 pages in my edition.
It does not get less weird for the next two chapters.
The next chapters are so weird. But I think it's worth pointing out that like you said earlier, there's this kind of a roller coaster effect of what happens where he's the tension ramps and then it is dissipated by a domestic scene. I think if a modern storyteller were writing this story, this chapter would probably almost certainly be cut. But it's part of what makes Tolkien so special is we get this slow unfolding of the story. We get the depth. We get the bits about hobbits really loving mushrooms. We get the weird scene where they're all like bathing naked together, presumably singing songs and splashing each other.
It's the singular vision of this irascible person, J.R.R. Tolkien. Like, there's no committee that's writing this,
Yes.
Sure, he's got editors and he's getting input from Clive and others, but it's his vision. And it's really an expression of like Western artistry, where like that individual expression is like somehow sacred. And so we get that here, which is why it's so strange. That it's not really written to be sold or to as a product. It's just written as an expression of like one man's training and funny predilections and what he thinks is funny and, you know, and what he thinks is interesting in one place. It's like, I don't know. There's not a lot of things like that out there, especially now.
There's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. We are so blessed to have it.
I mean, so
thank God we have it.
It's lovely.
Well, the real question, do we think that C.S. Lewis and Tolkien ever took a bath together?
I mean, who knows? Walking home from the Eagle and Child a little drunker than usual, and you know, one thing leads to another. Next thing you know, you're in the bath.
Well, on that note, next week things get a little darker. Things get a little weird. Chapter 6, The Old Forest.
So thanks for reading along with us. Join us next week for Chapter 6, The Old Forest. If you want to help us out, share this podcast with a Lord of the Rings fan in your life, or if you don't like it, send it to one of your enemies. Leave us a review, subscribe on YouTube, and of course visit waywardwizards.com for all those links and more info. Thank you for joining us in our conspiracy. We'll see you next week.